So, of course, any movie that turns a profit gets the inevitable sequel. At least, that was the rule back in the day. Today, everything just gets remade. Fright Night Part 2 is a weird case. It got a really limited theatrical release for whatever reason, and the DVD has been out of print for some time, making it a rare find. And yet, it brings back the two main characters, Charlie and Peter Vincent, as well as retreads the main themes, so it's kind of baffling to me why it was kind of hidden in the shadows like some deformed child, never allowed to leave the attic out of embarrassment. Honestly, it isn't a bad film, but like most horror sequels, it just uses the exact same formula. You can tell they had a tighter budget because there aren't as many cool effects, instead relying on pure gore to tide us over. They're in there, but they were mostly saved for the film's climax, which is drawn out and nowhere near as suspenseful as the final scene from the first film. As you'd expect, Charlie's now in college, and he's seeing a psychiatrist in order to convince himself that vampires don't exist. At the same time, Peter Vincent, who got his old job back, remembers the events of the first film, but refuses to believe that it was real, seeking a rational explanation for what really happened. That's the biggest problem for me. The best part of a sequel is that you don't have to spend so much time setting up the characters, so you can develop the action and the plot more. But here, even though Charlie and Vincent are well aware of their history together, they have to be reconvinced, so just as much time is spent setting things up. And that's not how it should be. The movie should just start with Vincent and Charlie fully prepared to take on more vampires. They even do another scene where Vincent looks at his mirror, realizes the vampire in question doesn't cast a reflection, and is finally convinced that they exist. Again. This time there's a group of vampires that are all being led by Regine Dandridge. Yeah, Jerry's sister. This is pretty cliche, and in my opinion, one of the laziest twists to any film, excluding The Empire Strikes Back. But back in the 80s, the whole I am your father craze still hadn't quite died down, so this unfortunately happened a lot. You've also got some crazy, emotionless vampire who always seems to be rolling around on skates, a psychopathic werewolf guy who kind of resembles Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, and this big Frankenstein's monster-looking guy who eats bugs. He's played by Brian Thompson, who you might remember from that crappy Mortal Kombat Annihilation movie. Oh, and Charlie has a new girlfriend, Alex, who's pretty, but not as memorable as Amy. And because the main vampire is female, the movie just switches the gender roles around so that she seduces the guys. This just doesn't work as well because most of the time, when she does her little exotic dances, they're really abstract and she does them alone. It worked better for Chris Sarandon in the first film because he danced with someone, and it looked much more exotic. And Julie Carmen is a fine actress, but she's nowhere near as threatening as her brother. The one thing the film does a little differently is that it plays with the notion of Charlie becoming a vampire. It never really goes anywhere, and of course, the power of love cures him right up. Ultimately, there's not a lot to say about this one. It's a lackluster sequel that tries to match the first film on a lower budget, and what we get is a mediocre rehash. Again, it isn't a bad film. I like it purely because of William Ragsdale and Roddy McDowall, but in the end, there's no reason to watch it, especially if you're just coming off of the original.